Don't be a stranger. You're always welcome here.
You know, there's something magical about revisiting legendary single-player games. It's not just about nostalgia, it's about rediscovering what made those experiences unforgettable in the first place. These aren't just games you play. They stick with you, get under your skin, and maybe even hit differently now than they did back then. Today we're diving into 13 single-player masterpieces that deserve another run-through this year. So, let's get started. First up, we have Sleeping Dogs. This one's one of those games that hits differently depending on where you are in life, you know? Back in 2012, it felt like the GTA formula got dropped into a Hong Kong action movie blender, and somehow it came out even cooler. Wei Shen, if we're being honest here, is the definition of an underrated protagonist. He's juggling loyalty, identity, and an overwhelming amount of kung fu chaos. But here's the thing, the hand-to-hand combat is where this game shines. Fully decked out brawls feel so crunchy and satisfying, almost like every punch has weight behind it. And revisiting it now, there's something fascinating about its tighter, smaller, open world. It's detailed, compact, and alive in a way modern massive sandboxes sometimes lose sight of. Plus, let's not forget, the story's solid. It's got betrayal, heart, and enough moments to make it emotionally sticky. I'd argue, too, that this year feels like a perfect reset moment for this. A game that doesn't just want you to explore, it wants you to master street combat, nail impossible driving stunts, and look stylish while you're at it. It's aged better than most, kind of like classic action cinema. Up next is Tomb Raider. You know, I always think about the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot like it's this perfect action movie that somehow you get to control. Lara's origin story, well, this version of it, just feels so grounded. Okay, sure, grounded in a jumping off cliffs and surviving boat crashes sense, but it works. You start as this rookie explorer, right? She's scared, desperate, and gets her hands dirty in ways that the older Lara never had to. By the end, you're this total force of nature. The pacing between solving the tomb puzzles, sneaking around with your bow, and then the adrenaline-pumping combat is balanced so well. Revisiting it now kind of reminds you how this game redefined what action-adventure titles could feel like. You've got those environmental puzzles, these huge cinematic set pieces, and then quieter moments when you're just wandering, seeing the wreckage of past explorers. And honestly, the island setting is still stunning. That mix of lush jungle and ancient ruins never stops being cool. Plus, I think there's something nostalgic about playing this one now. It's from 2013, but it doesn't feel that old. It's like one of those early memories of modern gaming, where everything started to go big on realism. Coming in next is Prototype. Let's talk about chaos. Unfiltered, city-leveling chaos. Prototype is essentially power fantasy turned up to the max. You're Alex Mercer, this biomutant guy who's just as much predator as he is protagonist. The way he tears through enemies is ridiculous in the best kind of way. Think absorbing people's abilities, shape-shifting into these absurd weapons, and flinging cars around like they're paper planes. It's messy, it's loud, it's kind of fantastic. Now here's the thing, not every bit of this game is polished. Yeah, the visuals might feel a little dated by today's standards, and the city map can get repetitive. But it's not the textures or the realism that keep pulling you back. It's the unrelenting sense of destruction and freedom in a massive urban sandbox. There's so much anger woven into the gameplay, like Alex is basically rage incarnate, and somehow that still feels cathartic even now. If it's been a while since you played this, or maybe you haven't at all, it's worth diving back in just to remind yourself of what fun used to mean before everything got bogged down by narratives trying to rival prestige TV. Prototype doesn't need all that. It's just straightforward havoc, and I'm weirdly into that. Next up, we have Red Dead Redemption. The shadow of Red Dead Redemption 2 looms large, doesn't it? Like, let's be honest, most of us think of Red Dead Redemption 2 now when someone even mentions this series. But going back to the first Red Dead Redemption hits differently. There's this raw, unpolished grit to it. John Marston feels so much more vulnerable compared to Arthur Morgan. Like he's tired before you've even pressed start. His story feels smaller, more personal, and way more desperate. If you never touched the original because it was stuck on the PS3 or Xbox 360, now is your moment. It's on PC now, which, honestly, finally. Rockstar took their sweet time, but the port works. It runs smoother than ever, and the textures, surprisingly, still hold up. There's something timeless about the dust-covered towns, the lonely sunsets out on the frontier, and the way the music just seeps into every quiet moment. The game's slower pacing might throw you off at first if you've been binging modern action titles, but lean into it. There's a patience to Red Dead Redemption that, when you let it in, settles over you like a weighted blanket, except, loaded with melancholia and outlaws.
Hi Faith, welcome back.
Coming in next is Mirror's Edge. Parkour in games is tricky. Sometimes it feels more like a feature than a system. But Mirror's Edge? It's pure motion. From the second you're running along rooftops, leaping off ledges, or crashing through glass windows, it doesn't feel like another game. It feels like an experiment in momentum. Honestly, how often do you get a first-person game that's not about violence but flow? This game was saying something about game mechanics way back in 2008, and I don't think we fully appreciated it at the time. The thing is, it doesn't click for everyone. It's awkward if your brain can't lock into the rhythm. Like, the tiniest stutter in movement can send Faith into this fumbling mess, and you're restarting the same jump sequence 50 times. Some people have absolutely no patience for that. But when you hit the groove, it's something else. You're not pressed for time, and yet you catch yourself pushing harder, faster, always aiming for that perfectly uninterrupted run. It's refreshing in a weird, finicky way, like a palate cleanser for your thumbs. There's no kind of chaos similar to Dying Light, but I can assure you that this game is really fun.
I will crush you!
Next on the list, we have Batman Arkham Asylum. Let's start where the Arkham series began. Arkham Asylum isn't just a great Batman game. It's one of the blueprint games for modern action-adventure titles. You're stuck inside Gotham's most infamous mental hospital, and every moment feels like it's seeped in dread. The walls almost feel alive, like the building itself hates you. There's something about being outnumbered and trapped with psychopaths like the Joker and Scarecrow that makes Batman feel vulnerable in a way most games just don't. The combat still holds up. That free-flow beatdown system has been copied so many times at this point, but nothing has that same weight or rhythm as when you're juggling counters and dishing out haymakers as the Dark Knight. The stealth is phenomenal too, and I swear the feeling of picking off enemies one by one while they panic can never be overstated. The Predator rooms might just be the highlight of the whole experience. Even the narrative feels so focused here, more contained than the open-world sprawl of later games in the series. Arkham Asylum is stripped down, tighter, and honestly that works in its favor. It's a pressure cooker of brilliantly executed tension without ever feeling bloated.
I can't take the shot from here, Cole! Hit him, Cole. Spin him out.
Up next, we have L.A. Noire. Nobody talks about this game enough anymore. It's like this quiet masterpiece that just keeps sitting in the corner waiting for people to look at it again. Playing as Cole Phelps, you're navigating the seedy underbelly of post-war Los Angeles, and there's nothing else quite like it. Rockstar threw so much into the pot here. Detective interrogations, car chases, shootouts, and even some of the most painstaking facial animations ever created. That huge push for realism is still impressive, even now. The investigations make the game. Every clue you pick up feels deliberate, like you're piecing together a puzzle shaped by human deception. Questioning suspects can get tense, sometimes frustratingly tense, because the interrogations expect you to pay attention. You're looking for tells, shifty looks, unsteady voices, that subtle glint of guilt or confidence, stuff that most games just don't make you consider. The open world itself might seem underwhelming if you're expecting GTA. LA in this game isn't about chaos though, it's about mood. The streets feel staged like a movie set, there to immerse you in noir storytelling. Running through it again this year feels oddly timely, given how much detective story revival is happening in pop culture. This game is a time capsule that's still worth breaking into.
Watch on those galleons. See they don't give us trouble. They won't park this weather.
Next up is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. As we all know, Assassin's Creed games have been all over the place since the original. A little sneaking here, a little revolution there. But Black Flag is a different one. They gave up on whatever historical accuracy they had left and throw some pirate nonsense fun. And honestly, it works. You're Edward Kenway, stabbing fools one moment and captaining a ship through vicious storms the next. The game has this infectious energy, like it's begging you to embrace the chaos of life on the high seas. Naval combat steals the show. Boarding enemy ships mid-battle, blasting cannonballs at full sail, and upgrading your ship, the Jackdaw, makes you feel like you're leading your own pirate fleet. The open-world Caribbean adds to that illusion of freedom. You're basically hopping from island to island, messing with colonial powers and looting treasure chests like some kind of historical action hero. Everything clicks when the shanties kick in. Your crew singing as you steer the jackdaw across turquoise waters is just serenity. That mix of dangerous action and calm moments stuck with me years later. Black Flag is the perfect game to revisit when you just want an experience that doesn't care about subtlety. Pirates don't need subtlety anyways.
Shoot the shit out of that thing!
At number 5, we have Left 4 Dead 2. Okay, yeah, technically it's more of a co-op multiplayer game, but hear me out, Left 4 Dead 2 has some incredible single-player potential if you crank up the difficulty and let the AI partners try to keep up with your pure survival instincts. This thing is an absolute zombie gauntlet. Every level feels like it's playing mind games with you, throwing hordes, specials, and funky little curveballs at just the worst possible times. The pacing is perfect. It's this beautiful balance between quiet tension, the kind of quiet where you know something's about to go horribly wrong, and full-on chaos when the infected come pouring in. The way the AI adapts to you, changing enemy spawns and tweaking the difficulty based on how well or terribly you're doing, makes every replay feel different. And the campaigns, each one is like its own mini horror movie. From the stormy atmosphere of Hard Rain to the frantic finale at the Parish Bridge, there's this cinematic quality to everything. Replaying this now makes you realize how much more personality this game has compared to more modern shooters. Grab your melee weapon, because the frying pan slams still hit just as satisfyingly as they did in 2009. Next on the list is the 2008 Prince of Persia. This is the Prince of Persia game you probably forgot about but shouldn't have. It's gorgeous, for starters. That cel-shaded art style still looks like a dream, with its pastel hues that make every cliffside, ruin, and corrupted temple feel like a digital painting. You spend the entire game climbing, leaping, and wall running through this world, and it's so ridiculously smooth. Movement feels intentional in every frame, like the parkour is less about speed and more about elegance. The story trades in epic battles for something quieter. It's about the bond between two characters. The prince and Alika are what make every step of this journey feel personal. She's not just your companion, but integral to both gameplay and the narrative. The dynamic between them evolves slowly, and the way Alika saves you when you miss a jump makes the deathless design actually work in its favor. It's not about difficulty, it's about rhythm. Revisiting this feels like a welcome escape from all the bloated open-world games out there. It's linear, clean, and simple, without being shallow. Nobody really talks about this one anymore, but it deserves a second chance.
Enemy sighted!
Up next, we have Warhammer 40k Space Marine. With all the buzz around Space Marine 2, it's kind of crazy how people forget the absolute banger that was the first game. Space Marine came out swinging with one goal: to make you feel unstoppable. You're Captain Titus, a walking tank in the iconic ultramarine armor, blending sci-fi and fantasy into one brutal package. Nothing hits quite like shredding through waves of orcs, swapping between ranged bolter fire and hammering them into pieces with your chainsword. It's so over the top you can't help but lean into it. The story might surprise you if you're expecting just mindless action. There's weight to this narrative, a grim seriousness that somehow balances the absurdity of the gameplay. The Warhammer universe is huge, but Space Marine takes such a focused approach that you're never lost in its seemingly endless lore. It's dark, atmospheric, and relentless from beginning to end without ever losing steam. If you're hyped about Space Marine 2, and let's be real, who isn't at this point? Go back and play this first. Whether you're new or you've already crushed it years ago, it's an essential warm-up. The sequel wouldn't exist without Space Marine 1, and honestly, that alone makes it worth revisiting.
Kid pops him good. Starts to feel his bruises, though.
At number 2, we have Bastion. There's something special about Bastion. You can't talk about it without picturing every step you've taken on those floating, crumbling pathways. Supergiant Games absolutely nailed what it means to create a world that feels alive. Even as it's falling apart, everything about it grabs you. The hand-painted art, the tight combat, that perfect blend of action and storytelling. Then, of course, there's the narrator. That low, gravelly voice reacting to every move you make. It's part of what makes Bastion unforgettable. It's wild to think about how much this game shaped Supergiant's legacy. They've hit massive heights since with games like Hades, but Bastion was the start of it all. The music gets under your skin in a way few soundtracks ever do. Combat flows beautifully, balancing a classic RPG feel with something more modern and quick. It's simple yet satisfying, as if every swing of your hammer is pulling you deeper into the story. It stings that Bastion never got a sequel though. The potential is there, but it seems that the developer have already moved on, leaving Bastion as this vibrant gem standing on its own. Playing it now almost feels like holding on to a memory while knowing it's never coming back again. And somehow that makes it even more impactful. And at number 1, we have God of War 3. Before there was the thoughtful, bearded, dad-like Kratos you see today, there was the absolute storm of fury that was Kratos in God of War 3. He wasn't just angry, he was primal, a full-on wrecking machine with a singular obsession, bringing down every single god standing in his way. This wasn't about redemption or quiet reflection. It was messy, brutal, and unforgettable. From the moment it begins, with you scaling Mount Olympus on the back of a Titan, you're thrown into chaos, and it never takes its foot off the gas. The combat is relentless, the scale of the boss fights is absurd, and the entire thing feels over the top in the most satisfying way possible. Tearing through Zeus, Poseidon, and even Helios isn't just gameplay. It's a flex of what the PS3 could do back then. It's easy to see how much Kratos has changed since then, but there's a nostalgia in revisiting this era of his story. The world wasn't as complex or intimate, and Kratos certainly wasn't as layered, but there's a purity to that rage-driven adventure that's hard to replicate. Going back to God of War 3 now feels like jumping into a time capsule of epic proportions. The raw energy still holds up. So yeah, if you missed this during its release back in 2010, there's a remastered version of the game that are available on both PS4 and PS5. Alright, so those were just 13 of the single-player legends that are absolutely worth re-exploring this year. Maybe you've already played some of these, or maybe one of them is about to hit your backlog for the first time. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed hanging out, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more.